people get elected in November and take office in January. You have time to get a staff together. They send you to Congress school. They teach you what all this lingo is down there, when the votes take place and how you're supposed to vote. I didn't have that opportunity. I got elected May 5th, and I was sworn in a week later, May 12th, because the vacancy was there. And I thought it was very nice. It was a wonderful ceremony. John Boehner was the speaker at the time. They stopped the votes. The speaker called the House into order. They brought me up. Some people said a couple of nice things about me. They told me as I'm walking up, they'll love you if you speak for 30 seconds. It doesn't even matter what you say. Because after I spoke, we voted and everybody got to go home. So I do that, and the very first vote, every time we begin a vote series, a series of votes, every session, the first vote is for 15 minutes. They hold it open because there's members that are in their office, they're all over the Capitol, and they ring the bells to let everybody know the vote was just called. You have 15 minutes to vote, and no one wants to miss a vote. Because when you run for re-election, the first thing your opponent says, look at how many votes they missed. So nobody wants to miss a vote. Even if we're voting, naming a cattle, Harriet, in West Virginia, you want to vote on it. Yes or no, it doesn't matter, as long as you voted. So the first vote's 15 minutes. After I placed my very first vote in Congress, everybody starts screaming out my name, and I said, this is a wonderful place. I cast my first vote, people are calling me out, they're wishing me well still. After the first vote, the second vote's every 2 minutes. I almost missed my second vote. The desk, the Republicans have a desk on the floor of Congress, the House, the Democrats have a desk, and it's manned by staff that makes sure everybody votes. So I almost missed my second vote, and I thought they would just welcome me some more. But it's an amazing experience. When I was the district attorney, I dealt with public safety. It's a remarkable responsibility when you think about being responsible for the safety of our residents. But it was only one issue. Now I'm in Congress, I deal with 24 issues every single day, none of which I'm an expert on, but all of which are interesting and incredibly important. Today, before I got here, I met with widows from firefighters who died in 9/11, talking about whether or not Congress is going to allow them to sue Saudi Arabia. It's pretty important stuff. After that, I met with communication workers from Verizon who are on strike. They're out 13 days, 39,000 people walked off their jobs, so I got to meet with them. After that, I met with some pastors about anti-violence in our communities, in Staten Island and in Brooklyn. Then I went to a doctor's appointment. I won't tell you about that. But then, my day is filled with so many things. And it's even more busy when I get to Washington. Our sessions either begin on Monday and end on Thursday, or begin on Tuesday and end on Friday. We call the day we start landing day, so when everybody lands. And the day we come home, we call takeoff day. The day we land, votes start at 6:30. And the reason for that is people have to come from all over the country to get there. I have an easy commute. One of my staff drives me to Amtrak at Metro Park. I have a 2-hour and 20-minute ride to Union Station, and I'm 5 minutes from my office at the Capitol. It's right there at the Capitol. And people say to me, you must get so much work done on that train. It's nice. I fall asleep before I get to Trenton. So. But other people have a less easy commute than I do. The leader from California, Bakersfield, California, flies to Denver, then first he has an hour ride to the airport, then a flight to Denver, then a flight to Washington. So a lot of people have a much more difficult commute, so we don't start votes until 6:30. The day we take off, the day we leave for the week, no votes are after 3 o'clock, and that's to allow people to go home. And you think about those people out west, when they're coming into Washington, they're already at a 3-hour disadvantage. When they're getting up at 4:30 in the morning, it's already 7:30 here, so it takes their days are very, very long. And then when they're going home, we don't have votes until, no voting takes place after 3 o'clock. But when we're there, it's packed. I don't know if you guys saw 60 Minutes last night. There was a piece about how Congress members spend more time trying to raise money than they do legislating or working on constituents. I don't know when these guys find the time. I've never made one phone call for a donation. And some of these people spend 30 hours a week. I get up at 6:30 in the morning. I sleep in my office. There's about 100 of us that do that. A glamorous life of a congressman, right? I have like this cot that's in an alcove in my office. I start at 6:30 in the morning, go down to the gym. I like to tell you I go down to the gym, but I only shower there, I don't work out. I come right back upstairs, and we're starting by 7:30 in the morning. And sometimes don't end until 10:30 at night. But I would rather do that than in the past. Members who had my seat before me have told me, you knew which day you were arriving down in Washington, you just never knew when you were coming home, because they used to drag things out. Now with the schedule, with the new leadership, they pack it in. It's much more manageable to have a life. And as the provost said, I am on Homeland Security and Foreign Affairs. We all get committee assignments. And I was very fortunate in a short period of time I was there to be handed the gavel of the subcommittee, the Committee on Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Communication. Something that's very important to the district in which we live. Somebody heard I was speaking and banging the doors to get in. And so, it's Pat. It's very important when you think about our district, because in my jurisdiction not only covers terrorist attacks and threats to our nation, but also natural disasters. So when you think about how our community was devastated by Superstorm Sandy, and how other people in the country saw on television what happened in Lower Manhattan 14 years ago, but we smelled it. It's very important, the committee assignment that I have received, the responsibility of heading out up for our nation in those two specific areas. I'll tell you, I think the most surprising thing you will find about Congress is all the good work that's being done. Our media, and we could talk about the president. Did you guys know this presidential election? We could speak about that in a little bit. But with all the media attention to that, and people covering what candidates say about each other's size of each other's body parts, nobody's realizing the good work that's happening in Congress, and I think the public will be very surprised at that. When people ask me why I wanted to go, I used to run every 4 years as DA. Now I have to run every 2 years. I used to go home and sleep every night in my own house. Now 3 nights a week I sleep in a kind of cot in Washington. I went for a number of reasons, but two of the most important ones was for the health care of the rescue workers and the recovery workers from 9/11. And in my first 12 months, we were able to pass a bill that provides them with health care for the next 75 years. It had expired. They didn't know people who were exposed to the elements down there are now experiencing diseases that they never thought they would ever have. Most of them are cancers. And we had to fight, many of our colleagues, to get this done. It wasn't that our colleagues in Washington didn't think they deserved health care, these brave men and women. What it was that they thought New York should pay for it. Everybody in Washington thinks that New York is so wealthy, we should pay for our own roads, our own health care, and should receive federal funding. Despite the fact that every dollar New Yorkers send to Washington, they only get 70-something cents back. We're aiding a lot of the rest of our nation who's less fortunate than we are, less wealthy as we are. So I think things like that, the 21st Century Cures Act that we passed, we gave NIH, the National Institute of Health, $10 billion over the next 5 years. $2 billion a year for 5 years to find cures and treatments for diseases that we have none for. There's 10,000 known diseases in the world. There's cures and treatments for 500 of them. There's 9,500 diseases that we have no treatment and cures for. We were told by the head of NIH that if they are just able with that $10 billion to cure Alzheimer's disease, something my mom suffered from, it would pay for the entire bill. So good things like that happen. I think most people would be surprised about that. The thing that surprised me the most about Congress is the legislative body, the people who were there. Other than Senator Schumer, everybody else had a job before they got there. It is remarkable about the diversity of people and their backgrounds. I come from a prosecutorial background. I sit next to a gentleman from Mississippi. I gotta tell you, I don't understand the word this guy says. And he speaks so slow. Sometimes he's talking, I get up to go to the bathroom, I come back, he's still saying the same thing. But he's a wonderful man. There's physicians in Congress, there's businessmen. A good buddy of mine was a pharmacist from Georgia. There are teachers, there's probably too many lawyers. There's an abundance of people with a wealth of information and life skills that contribute to everything we do. We voted to repeal what I've been calling the Unaffordable Care Act. The President calls it the Affordable Care Act, I call it the Unaffordable Care Act. We voted to repeal it. What we've done is ask the Doctors Caucus, the doctors, the physicians that are in Congress, the nurses that are in Congress, to come up with an alternative for us. People who have been in the trenches, the people that know the failures or the faults of our current system, to come up with solutions for them. And we take various groups that have a particular expertise or background and ask them to look to solve some of our nation's problems. So I think it's an incredible, well-diverse group of people. But with that diversity comes sometimes conflict. I have found that there's less partisanship than I thought there would be. Most of the disagreements that we have in Congress are geographic. You take gun control, for instance. Our Speaker, Paul Ryan, comes from Janesville, Wisconsin. We came back from the holiday break over the winter, and he told us how he and his wife bought their 6-year-old some type of weapon. It wasn't an assault rifle, but some kind of rifle or something for Christmas. He said, back in New York, we buy our kids sleds. But whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, in Janesville, Wisconsin, after your child's birthday, the second most important day of the year is the first day of hunting season. I don't know when that is in New York, but the people in Janesville, Wisconsin do, despite whatever their party politics are. So I found that a lot of our differences that we have down in Washington are geographic, not so much Democrat or Republican. There is some partisanship, but there is some loyalty expected of you to your party. I have to tell you, the first 3 major votes that I took in Congress, I voted against the Republican Party and the leadership. I was smart enough to tell them beforehand that I was a no vote, and then I explained to them why I was a no vote. But there's a magic number in Washington. It's 218. That's how many members have to vote for something to get it passed. There's 435 of us. If you have 218, you pass a piece of legislation in the House of Representatives. So I don't know if any of you guys watch the House of Cards, but there is actually a whip in Congress. He doesn't have a whip, but sometimes it feels like he does. And they go around and they count votes. Come up to you. How are you on the free trade agreement? I'm a no vote. Why is that? Because the leadership would like you to vote yes on it. And you tell them why. And then they'll leave you alone. They'll go around and see if they have the 218 without you. If they don't, they'll come back. And on one of my particular votes involving transportation funding for New York, they'll try to help you to get to a yes vote. They'll say, well, what if we amended the bill to say this? Would that help get you there? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But from the very first day I was there, I realized there's a reason why they call us the House of Representatives. Each one of us represents 740,000 Americans. They're different Americans, but they're Americans. And I realized that the folks here sent me down there to represent them, not me. And when you think about the seriousness of the votes we take, some of them affect the entire world, like the Iran nuclear deal. The vote we took on that Iran deal affects the entire world, the safety of the entire world. It's pretty serious stuff. Every other vote we take affects 300 million Americans. So people say, wow, how do you labor over these things? I find it very simple. Is this good for the people back home? Is it good for New York City and New York State? Is it good for our country? And the votes I've found come very easily. So that's a little bit of Congress in a nutshell. Besides my almost missing my second vote on the floor, I was in Congress for 3 days, excuse me, when so far the most embarrassing thing happened to me. It might not be at the end of my career, but so far it's been. Kevin McCarthy is the majority leader for the Republican Party, and Kevin comes from California, and Kevin invited me to a private dinner in the wine cellar of a steakhouse in Washington, D.C. It was just he and myself and 30 of his largest donors. And why they do this is that with the hopes that if their donors get to know you, maybe they'll support you in your re-elections. So we are at this dinner, and Kevin starts the dinner off by thanking everyone for coming and saying that every dinner that he hosts, he always asks a question of the group, and tonight he's going to ask, dead or alive, if you could have dinner with one individual, who would you choose? He says, Donovan's new, let's ask him. They look like a fun group. Little did I know. I said Heidi Klum. Next guy said Gandhi. And it went downhill after that. Mother Teresa, Christ, Abraham Lincoln. 12 times I'm embarrassed. So this one guy across from me says, Thomas Jefferson. I had to stop him. I said, you're full of crap. You go into a restaurant, there's 2 tables, an empty chair next to Heidi, empty chair next to Jefferson. You gonna tell me you're gonna sit next to Jefferson? I gotta tell you, not one of those people donated to my campaign. So let's open up. We can talk about the presidential elections, the primaries. Yes, my friend.
You had mentioned before about how you've been with Speaker Boehner and you've also been with Speaker Ryan. Could you talk more about the difference between the two of their leadership styles, how they've run kind of the House of Representatives, and what your experiences with them have been?
Yeah, it's a great difference. I served under Speaker Boehner for a short period of time. Paul Ryan did not want to be Speaker of the House. Paul Ryan is a data wonk. Paul Ryan went to Congress 17 years ago with the hopes of one day being a chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, people who did the tax code. He's wanted to make our tax code simpler and fairer. And lo and behold, a year ago, he is made chairman of Ways and Means. And 6 months later, we took it away from him and made him speaker. He did not want to be speaker. Some people would say, oh, I don't want it, but yeah, please, vote for me. Paul really didn't want to. But Paul has opened up the process where I'm not even a freshman, I'm a half a freshman. I didn't even come in with a class. I haven't served a full term. When I run this November, and that's my pitch to you, when I run this November, I'll be running for my first full term. But Paul has opened up the process where a half freshman like me could go to him, and when people with much more seniority than I are proposing a 5-year health plan for the Zadroga victims, I could go to him and say, Paul, I have 7,000 members of my community who are in that health fund. This is the most important thing to me. I came to Washington to help Sandy victims and these brave men and women who need our service. They answered our nation's call. It's time for our nation to answer their call. And Paul Ryan will listen to a half freshman and says, you need this back home? I said, I need this back home. This is the reason I came to Congress. Not that we completed it, now I can leave Congress. I like it so much I'd like to stay a little longer. But so Ryan has really opened up the process where I don't know, I served such a short period of time under Speaker Boehner's leadership. I don't know how the process was, but he was not as approachable as Paul is. Yes, sir.
Thanks for your very, very interesting presentation. I have a question. Based on the Garner and Garney cases, do you think the United States will and should have a new style of culture of law enforcement?
I'm not too sure. We used to say that bad cases or difficult cases make bad law. People have knee-jerk reactions when they don't like a decision or a result, and they want to change everything. I was the prosecutor in the Eric Garner matter. I was the DA. And because of our grand jury proceedings are secret, and there's a real purpose for that, people wouldn't come to testify if they thought the world knew they would testify. Everybody wanted to change the process. People wanted us to reveal, open up the grand jury process to the public, which actually under our criminal laws is a felony. There were people asking me to commit a felony. But I think people should take a step back and see, was there something wrong with the process or the procedures? And if so, how do you tweak them? But maybe nothing was actually wrong. So there's been a lot of publicity about that. There's been a lot of publicity about a lot of the cases. There was a settlement today with a family of a 12-year-old boy who was shot by a police officer. So there's a lot of light. There's certainly a need to improve, and we should always strive to improve. But there are people who want to throw out a criminal justice system that survived over 200 years. And although there are people who have not committed crimes that have been convicted of it, we try to have measures in place that prevent that, or if when that does take place, appeals to make that take. but it's very difficult to find a more just system than ours. You don't know how, you couldn't find 12 people to agree that the sun rose in the east today. You get 12 people to agree at a pettit jury trial that someone's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. There's real safe measures in there. And the ability for someone to cross-examine witnesses, to test their credibility, there's no better system. Yes, Steve?
You said that things are getting done in Congress, which
Yeah.
is good to hear, but that's not the public perception. Public perception, and I think it's getting expressed through what appears to be the heightened level of anger out in among the population, then gets as reflected in the presidential campaigns and so forth. That nothing's getting done. That government is really Congress particularly is at it. Gridlock, and I think I don't remember the latest statistics I saw about the favorability,
It's probably 14%
approval rating of
mothers would rather their children married convicts than congressmen.
Right. So why the disparity? You were saying things are getting done. Is it simply a matter of communication?
Part of it might be communication. I don't know if everybody heard, but there's a great disparity between what the public's perception of what we're doing and what we're actually doing. Part of it might be communication on our behalf. Other things might be, it just doesn't sell news. Anybody know how many planes landed safely today? If one crashes, it's a headline. Nobody's talking about the million that landed safely. It's just the drive that people have for news. Why? And I loved Prince. He was the first 8 pages of every newspaper the other day. I loved him, man. He's one of my favorite artists, but he was 8 pages of that. Meanwhile, the president's speaking about possibly releasing 28 pages that have been classified from the 9/11 Commission report. I don't know if that was in any paper. So, the media might have part of this. Part of it might be our own problem of communicating things. But there are great things happening. And how do we get things done? How do I convince some of my colleagues that although they thought we should pay for the health care of the rescue workers and the recovery workers, and not just police officers and firefighters, construction workers were down there for months cleaning up the site. And with dignity, every time they found what they thought was human remains, they would stop, they'd blow the whistle, and then have a ceremony removing that and bringing it out of the site. So how do we get things done? How would a half freshman get colleagues of mine who wanted no payment or wanted only 5 years? Well, with that, it was real simple. The people that were obstructionists, or people who weren't going along with us, I just found out how many victims they had in their district. And it could be as little as 6. But then you go to that person and say, there's 6 people in the fund from your district. You want to tell them that you don't think they deserve health care from the federal government? So there are ways to do it. There's also trade-offs. I always use the example of the water rights in the Colorado River. I really don't care about them. It's not that I don't care about them, they just don't affect me. But they affect the people in those areas, and they're represented by members of Congress. So when I need transportation money for New York, because in the federal government, they don't think we should be funding mass transit like subways. They think that it's surface transportation, highways and bridges we should be paying for. New York should pay for its own subways. Why should people's tax dollars from Iowa pay for New York City subways? Well, when I need money for subways in New York City, because part of Brooklyn that I represent has subways, you go to those people that need water from the Colorado River and say, you guys need a vote? I really don't care one way or another. I can vote yay or nay. It doesn't matter to me. But if you want a nay vote, I could use your help on getting some help from New York City in transportation. So there's some of this, it's not horse trading actually, it's just realizing that people represent the same number of people but with different interests. Members of Congress all represent the same number, but their residents have different interests than my residents have, the people I represent. And it's a way of getting both of the things done. Nobody wants to talk about the president's race? You gotta want to speak about the president's race, but yeah, you.
Yeah, okay. I really feel privileged. And you mentioned you oppose free trade.
Yes.
Do you oppose it out of principle, out of regional interest? If there is conflict between the principle and regional interest, which one do you follow?
Yeah, I was opposed to the free trade. I'm for fair trade. And they're not the same. They're not the same. Some of the countries that we're growing into, the president is proposing a trade agreement called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We haven't voted on that yet, but we did vote on the TPA, the authorization for him to go into this agreement and fast track it, meaning Congress can't put amendments to the bill or anything, it's just one bill. Workers in the United States will lose jobs because of it. And when I was told I was a no vote, and they said, no one's going to lose their job. In the bill is money to retrain people who will lose their jobs. So somebody's not telling the truth. And we pay people different wages than some of the people we would be competing with, which makes us uncompetitive. And because of the people who are making products in other countries that we'd be trading with get paid less, they don't have the buying power to buy our products. So it's free, it's just not fair. It's not fair to our American consumers, it's not fair to American workers. So that was the reason when I told leadership that, because they asked me the same question, you're not in favor of free trade? I said, no, I'm in favor of fair trade. When it's fair, I'll vote yes. And this is not fair to America, this agreement. Mr.
Yeah, so this is not a presidential race question, but
Because everybody's afraid to ask.
We're going to ask you.
I'm actually going down to DC this summer to intern for my home district, Congressman Scott Garrett.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was wondering what kind of your recommendations would be for a student who is going to intern in the House of Representatives for the summer.
My number one recommendation, don't eat the pizza in Washington. It's awful, man. The box it comes in tastes better. I would try, we all use interns, we all need interns, but some people aren't as attentive to the experience for the intern as they are for their office needs. Like we need bands of 500 letters about whether or not, the congressman's in favor of free trade. So here's a list, start writing. What I try to get my interns to do is at least see things. Come to a hearing, come with me. Come sit behind me at the hearing, see what goes on. Come to watch us. The voting is boring. Most of the time you don't even know what we're voting on. There's people talking, the person in the speaker's chair, the speaker's not there. Each of us take turns, we're a speaker for the day. It's almost like being a principal for a day, except much cooler. And they're saying this vote is open for 5 minutes, and you see a little blurb, it's for passage. Well, the people in the audience don't even know we're passing HR 1433. They don't even know what that is. So I tell interns, go see as much as you can, even if it doesn't pertain to our office. I'm on foreign affairs, and twice we've had Secretary Carey testify before us. And because I'm the most junior guy, you'll see on C-SPAN, these big hearing rooms with tiers of members of Congress, and the most senior guys get to sit on top. When you're the most junior guy, you sit closest to the witness. Me and Carey were like this. Every time he'd look at me, I'd stick my tongue out. No, I didn't. But it's amazing things to see. Bono testified last week. You couldn't even get into the hearing room because Bono was testifying. Nobody even knew what he was testifying about. All they knew was Bono was there. And you had a bunch of elderly Congress people not even know who Bono was. So there's like a lot of fun things to see. The difficulty with the summer is the fact is we will stop legislative work on July 15th because July 18th is the Republican Presidential Convention in Cleveland. The following week is the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia. And then we're on August recess. So it's going to be 7 weeks we're not even there. So there won't be any hearings going on, no voting going on. So do as much as you can up front before July 15th. That's when the good stuff's going to happen. And the good stuff this year is going to be, we're going to be under a gun to get things done before July 15th, so there'll be a lot of activity up until then. Right, it's a good time to come.
This question is related to yours. What kind of guidance or
That's why you only gave me water.
what kind of guidance or feedback would you give to students, current students, who are considering a possible political career?
Yeah, I guess a lot of people come to me and say, I want to be in politics. I said, what's that mean? I don't even know what that means. Do you want to run political campaigns? She helped get me elected. We didn't even pay her. Do you want to work for an elected official? Do you want to be an elected official? If you want to be an elected official, do you want to be an executive? You want to be a legislator? I was never a legislator before this. I was a prosecutor, DA for 12 years. Before that, I was the deputy borough president. Before that, I was the chief of staff. I was in the executive branch of government my entire life. So I always ask people, what's that mean you want to be in government, your policy? You want to be in government? You want to be a statesman? What is it that you want? Part of this process that students are going through is trying to figure out what it is that you want to do. And I tell everybody, our image of what people do for a living is based on what we see in television and in movies. A physician looks cool, Dr. McDreamy, get to date hot nurses and you operate on people's brains and cure them. Yeah. In real life, that person went through 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, 5 years of surgical residence, then a specialty in neurosurgery, and all at the same time eating Kraft's macaroni and cheese out of a box because they got paid about $28,000 a year doing that. And when they finished all that training, now they're 35. It's great, but you got to go through that to become that. So I've told everybody, and I always use dentists, and I love dentists. I love my dentist. But I said, go to a dentist's office. If you think you want to be a dentist, go sit in my dentist's office for half a day. Watch what she does. She puts her hands in other people's mouths. And you don't get to choose with mouths. You have to do it to all of them. And see if that's something you want to do. Because if you go to dental school for 4 years, go through your training, that's what you're going to do for the next 30 years. And it would be horrible to come out of school to realize that you don't want to be a dentist. Because with the dental degree, all you can do is practice dentistry or teach it. So go do internships. Go see what people do for a living. I got to make a confession here, and we're on tape. I used to read the wedding ads in the paper all the time, not to see if I knew who was getting married or where they were going on their honeymoon. I wanted to see what they were doing for a living, because they always put down what the people did for a living, to see if maybe that's what I wanted to do. I went to law school at 28 years old. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I graduated law school not knowing what I wanted to do. But I tried different things until I found what it was I wanted to do. Some people, I was very jealous. One of my best friends from high school wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. It's like he came out of his mother's womb, I don't know. And he's now a very successful orthopedic surgeon and very satisfied. It's one thing he wanted to do, he accomplished it, and it was everything he thought it would be. There are other people who think something is, and in reality it's not what they thought it was. So go intern places, speak to everyone. The other thing is you'll never know where your break's going to come from. I was a 8th year assistant district attorney in the Manhattan DA's office. I was done. I did everything I wanted to do. I tried the cases I wanted to try. There was nothing else I wanted to do there. I knew I wanted to do something else. A very good friend of mine who was a narcotics detective used to come into my office to lay on my couch or use my phone to make personal phone calls. I told him I was done. I was ready to go on. I didn't even know he did this. He was good friends with our then Borough President Guy Molinari, who had been looking for a chief of staff. And he said, I got a guy, you better look at him, but he's moving fast. So I got a call from the Borough President. I'd never met him in my life before. I went to see him, and 2 hours later, I was his chief of staff. So speak to everybody, because you never know where it's going to come from. Mike Bloomberg, who we could all agree is pretty successful at what he chose to do with his life. A good friend of mine ran his re-election campaign, ran his election campaign, stayed with the administration for the first term, and then ran the re-election campaign and wanted to leave. Mayor Mike told him to make a list of 50 people and go see each one of them. Don't ask any of them for a job. Just talk to them about their careers, talk to them about your interests. Mayor Mike knew before he ever reached 50, this guy would land somewhere. But he told him to speak to 50, don't speak to 49 people. And sure enough, now my friend Vinny is managing Jamie Dimon's money at JP Morgan. Making $1 gazillion, that's with a G, $1 gazillion he's making. So you just don't know where it's going to come from, so try everything. All right, if nobody's asking, I'm going to ask somebody. What do you think of the presidential campaign? Yes.
Would you like to comment on the presidential race?
You know, as a matter of fact, I would, but my time has run out, and it's,
Very good.
there are political scientists that will study this election cycle for decades. No one can understand it. No one can understand. But I have been telling everybody, whoever came up with the phrase, "Make America Great Again," struck a nerve. There's so many people that have lost faith in our country. People who feel that our friends don't respect us and our enemies certainly don't fear us any longer. And they want to make America great again. Hardworking people who now can't afford health care for their families. People who want to just pay their mortgages and their kids' tuitions, and I know what tuition is, guys. So I'm not too sure if it's the messenger or the message that struck a chord with so many people. We haven't seen this much excitement since 2008 with Barack Obama's first election. He didn't have this energy in the second election. And it seems like there's not as much energy on the other side for the front runner, but there is for the person trailing. Bernie Sanders lost our congressional district in that primary last Tuesday, 51-49. It's remarkable. This woman was a senator in our state and was Secretary of State for our nation, was the First Lady. Her husband is an icon in some people's eyes. And she wins our district by 2 points. So I think that's as much as Mr. Trump winning by 82%, or getting 82% of the vote.
What do you think about the deal that they cut today between Senator Cruz and...
I'm wondering if it's legal.
Sure.
I wonder if it's legal. Senator Cruz and Governor Kasich made an agreement that they wouldn't campaign, they would give each other certain states just so to make it competitive, to deny Donald Trump the delegates in that state.
Why would it be illegal?
I'm not too sure. Making political deals like that might be illegal. There are some things that you cannot deal with, or you cannot agree to in an election cycle. So I'm not too sure. I'm sure their lawyers figured it out before, greater minds than mine.
If I could ask you, this Carey Institute focuses on government reform, and we're looking with other reform groups, of course, at this past year in New York State, and the indictment and conviction of three, leaders, two of the leaders of the legislature. We hear every day in the papers now about other kinds of problems in the area of politics and money and so forth. You were a district attorney, you were a state official for a long time, so what do you think about money in politics, generally? In other words,
It's the thing that gets everyone in trouble.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you have to raise money to get elected and raise money to get reelected. And many times, people who donate to you expect something in return. When I was district attorney, because you have the power of subpoena and put people in a grand jury, you're prohibited from asking for campaign contributions. We had to set up a committee that was separate from myself to do all my campaign fundraising. Since I've been to Congress, I haven't broken that. I just don't have the ability to ask people. And I'm not going to do anything unethical or against my own beliefs because somebody gave me a $5,000 check. So it's a difficult thing. There's also difficulty in the fact that someone may deserve the attention of your office. They may have an immigration problem. They may have a procurement problem. They may have problems that they didn't receive their Social Security check this month. So is it unethical for you to call the Social Security Administration and say one of my constituents didn't receive her check this month and that woman gave you a $100 contribution? So the money makes this a very difficult business. There are ethical guidelines that we rely on. If you had an organization, not-for-profit organization, and asked for a letter of support from me, we run everything by ethics. And say, here's what we've been asked to do. Here's what we're proposing we do. You tell us whether we can do it or not. And we get something in writing from the ethics, the people in the House ethics, telling us that we were able to do that in case anyone questions it. But yeah, money is the difficulty thing. The mayor's all over the newspapers the last 2 days. Some of the things that not only accused, but two of our state legislative leaders were convicted of had to do with money and giving people favors. Then you get to the point where are friends of yours at a disadvantage because you could do something for a constituent who's a stranger, but if you do it for a friend who didn't get their Social Security check, are you doing somebody a favor you weren't supposed to? So there's gray areas in this, but most people get jammed up over money in fundraising. So, people are proposing, let's have campaign finance, let's do matching funds like the city of New York. City of New York has a 4-to-1 match. You raise $1, city of New York gives you 4 more if you're running for a city office. If your opponent, like when Mike Bloomberg didn't participate in that, his opponent received 6-to-1 matching funds. That's your taxpayer dollars. Every dollar they raised, they got 6 more. That dollar meant $7 to them. And that campaign finance was supposed to, 1, even the playing field, because when you participate, there's only a certain amount of money you could raise. And 2, is to make it fair so that more people get involved in the process. I'm not sure either one of them was successful. There's no such thing in Congress. You can spend as much as you want in congressional races. And then there's the difficulty or the issue of outside influence, super PACs. Jeb Bush had a super PAC before he even announced, raised $140 million. How many people could eat for that? $140 million before he even announced his campaign. Spent 42 of it in New Hampshire and got 4% of the vote for $42 million. So I always tell people when they say, how much money did you raise? I say the person with the most money doesn't win, the person with the most votes wins. I want the most votes. My opponent can have more money. I want the most votes. But it is a unnecessary, and when you talk about New York, what it costs for a commercial in New York compared to Casper, Wyoming, it's a very expensive place to run for public office.
Yeah, I once was with some people, they were talking about someone running against one of the congressmen, my congressman from the Upper West Side of New York. I won't mention who he is.
But he's retiring.
The calculation was that to run against him in a primary, you'd have to raise about $20 million.
Imagine
Just to run against him in a primary.
If you saw that Florida,
For a job that pays, I don't know.
we get paid how much? $174,000. Sounds like it is a lot of money. You have to maintain 2 residents, except for me, I live in my office, and don't pay rent. But you have to maintain 2 offices, and most people in Congress, including myself, took a cut in pay to do this. I got paid more as a district attorney than I do as a congressman. But if you watch that 60 Minutes piece last night, the fellow who was highlighted is a member of Congress from Florida who's now running for the United States Senate in Florida. That race will cost him $100 million. Barack Obama and Mitt Romney in 2012 each spent $1 billion. That's with a B. 2 presidents, and only one of them won.
Well, if we didn't have that pesky thing called the First Amendment, we could put in spending limits and so forth,
Right.
but I don't think we can do it.
The Supreme Court had
Anyway.
ruled that your spending, your donations are a form of speech,
Right.
and we have free speech in our country.
So do we have time for maybe one more question, and the Congressman has to, I think, move on to his next.
Yeah. We're good. Thank you for
Well,
not
thank
asking
you.
who I voted for. You missed it. Thank you so very much for listening.